All right. We're going to talk about some things that have been done previously, some technologies that are available right now, and then just where we're think where we're planning to go. And we really appreciate your feedback on this to make sure we're on the right track. So um, think about how budgeting is done today. And most all of you have got a spreadsheet that you put together over the years. It's customized to your operation. It's very flexible, but truth be told, it become very unwieldy as you start looking at a two-dimensional view of the world, whether you actually want to look at over a long time period. And probably the worst problem with most budgets are they're disconnected from accounting. Now, the built-in FBS budget function that comes with accounting creates a spreadsheet that matches your chart of accounts. You can modify that. You can do a simple comparison, dollar to dollar comparison, but it has some limitations. And about 10 years ago, we looked at this as an opportunity to integrate the budgets. So the goal was to perfectly mirror your chart of accounts. Probably most important, it was a dynamic database. So instead of a spreadsheet view, we were going to a database report for budgeting. We want to be able to build and also refresh to date from actual data, and be able to do multi-year projections and deal with production timing and cash timing. And if you worked on some crop budgets or systems that do overall enterprise budgeting for crops, they tend to are pretty good about coming up with unit costs and material needs, but the timing could well be in a different for purchases could well be in a different accounting year. So be able to deal with that, have internal inventories, be able to roll over balances one year to the next, and at the end of the day, do unit-based budgeting and monitoring. So we're not just looking at dollars, the dollar variance, but looking at whether it's a purchasing variance or a volume variance between actual, and be able to explain that at the ledger account level, and then be able to do multiple scenarios. So you start off with one plan, you have to get an optimistic version of it and a pessimistic version of it, and you have an updated version throughout the year. You know, with the inventories, with what the yields may be, playing markets change. So be able to deal with all that. So I'm going to speed through this, but this is one of the process of budgeting in a that we've worked at for a long time. It's gather known facts. You start with year one. It's a continuous process. Keep looking and refining, and then you can start go off the planning horizon. Now, but our software module called LifeCycle Budget was a derivation of coordinated financial statements that we programmed in AFRA, which we programmed, and then Dr. Howard Doster from Purdue University has a vision of LifeCycle Budget, and he wanted to be able to project all the way to terminal after tax equity. At terminal being you're the terminal one, but we're not quite that ambitious yet. We're just trying to do a good job at a short-term horizon, intermediate-term horizon. So we start off with having a Transaction Plus set up. If you've got crop audit, it requires you having fields and crop centers set up, and this will do. You have an option of doing specific seeds, chemical fertilizer, whatever on your list. You can use that as a budgeting concept, and you can have crop macros or recipes, which makes budgeting a lot faster. And some of the things that are optional for crop audit and smart feeder are mandatory for budgeting. So rate of gain table, if you're going to project out gains and sales and complete, you have using the planning module function. So we start with an ending balance sheet and plug in your inventories. You can work off a prior year income statement and know what your fixed costs are, be able to plug that in. And what this works on is based on scenarios. So you can set some things. This example was a first scenario: crop failure, high yields, just giving you a plan to move ahead. Beginning with scenario 1, you can clone those at any point in time. The one thing that I think is there's several weaknesses to this program. Fundamentally, it's a very powerful tool, but one of the weaknesses is the user interface is a little confusing, and it's got a lot of buttons and things like that. But let's just walk through the process. Start with a button to build budget, and you build budget can go read through your database from either this year or in this case we're setting up for budget year of 2008 and beginning and ending, and you can you're collecting what scenario you're building off of, and it goes through and reads the database. There's an option to roll over between budget years, so you get your projected inventories, seed, chemical, fertilizer, crops, animals will roll over, so you don't have to start from scratch in the new calendar year. And so there's a amortization schedule, and you could build the history on that. It reads through your database. You need to clean it up a little bit because most people don't have quite the level of detail in their loan detail to what the LifeCycle budget has. Input your inventories, and to understand how this works here, we're setting up defining what the specialized accounts are. Now, there's two, as you know, there's in FBS, there's two classifications of accounts, or from an integration standpoint, they're just a straight dollars, and there's accounts that are tied to inventories. And so we just need to tell it which ones we want to include in the budget, because it gets a little more complicated. In other words, you can't really copy from one year to the next anything related to inventories, because that's going to be so unique to that year that you need to be able to modify that. So there's some tools about what happens when there's a rollover function, a build function. Build takes from actual rollover, pulls from the prior balances, and so we just need to know how that's handled. Here's some samples of scenarios: weather events and marketing events and pandemics and other things that might be happening. Let's look at types of accounts. And again, this is all based on whatever you've already got set up in the system: your centers, your accounts, your fields. There's nothing to set up in LifeCycle Budget other than telling it which accounts you want to include in the budget. So here's some different record types. Okay, so here's a plan. This actually comes from coordinated financial statements, and we use that as a baseline and how this would work. But you see, it's a circular process. You go from one year to the next. You budgeting, you roll over balances, you move ahead. And so let's walk through a crop production marketing scenario. So again, you have to have a field set up. You have to have a crop production and a marketing center. And as Daryl was showing you earlier, in a cost analysis format, you needed the crop production is a work in process, the marketing center is the finished goods, or the profit center. So you need to have that in place. And you would need to do this if you're using straight FBS anyway. So it knows how to do that. Center field assignments or projects set up. You can have specific seed varieties, chemicals, and fertilizers, or you can use a generic, depending on how much detail you want to get to. And this goes back to the original presentation this morning, just how much detail you want to track and how you're going to use that. If you're trying to come up with work orders, you probably want to have specific seed, chemical, fertilizer. If you're trying to do a fast budget, then you make those things very generic. So let's walk through what's involved in a crop input. Now, there's two things going on here with this budget. Once, let's see, I built my actual from last year, my indirect costs, fixed costs, and other things, my utilities and others. I pulled that through, and I've created that in my database. But now I'm doing a crop plan for the new year. So I'm selecting budget input, and I say I want a crop operation and harvest input is type entry, and then I come up with this screen right here. So what I'm doing across here is this was an I was for crop inputs. I picked the center, and it brought the field, and it knows how many acres. And what I'm selecting is these are crop input macros. So let's say I just wanted a spring corn budget, and so spring corn, I had this recipe, these combination of chemicals and varieties. And at this point, the timing is not so critical. If I just want to do a quick, all the direct inputs I'm going to have for a crop, and at a fairly generic basis, I can just say I want this in April, and that's good, because it's generating an inventory requirement. It's not hitting the bank account. So I'm creating what I need, what needs to be used. And this is what's showing up here. This window here shows I'm using 55 units of Propel and 31 units of Pioneer 36B 75. And so it's creating the purchasing needs that I may actually have. I may be into 2022 here plan, but it's going to tell me what I need to buy at the end of 2021 for tax purposes. So it's what we're not showing here is this window around here showing you what's actually happening behind the scenes, and it's showing the inventory effect. But we just need a pop-up that shows here's the macro planning. Again, it's a user interface issue, but if you understand what we're doing here, we're getting the practice. And if you wanted to, you could put each pass across the field, and you want to use that in theory, you could use that as a driver for activity-based costing. But in this case, we just, at the very simplest level, you can say I've got a line for seed, for chemical, and fertilizer generically, and I'm using my average cost per acre. And I've got an example of a simple budget we put together there. I'm trying to create the need and the use and be able to do a quick enterprise budget, but I'm also trying to drive inventories of these inputs. Harvest, a little simpler, because I'm saying I'm gonna plug in my yield per acre and give it a unit price, and then it's going to calculate the value. It's going to put it into inventory, and I can make a marketing decision off those inventories. So right now it's showing my running crop inventory for that, and each of these lines creating the value. And here's where it's prompting for marketing center. I'm going to the production center of for over here, showing here's a production center that's saying I need to pick a marketing center because we'll do all our smart sales out of the marketing center just as we do with typical FBS. Now I can go back and do my input purchases, and input purchases I can do after the fact. I can do matching, or I can do before. So it's showing what my running inventory is, and I'm buying those inputs. So I can do a match to 1-to-1 with whatever I had in that macro definition, be it generic seed, generic herbicides and insecticides, generic fertilizer, or it could be specific products. So I go ahead and purchase it. I can do it in a different before it happens, because it's keeping perpetual inventories at the budget level of all my whatever I've defined, all my inputs, all my crops. And so here, crop sales is showing you what I got left, and I just go ahead and put in what my protected marketing values are. We're going to, before we go live here, I'm going to do livestock production and planning, do the same kind of thing. I'm going to see how things fit together. If you're using livestock, growing livestock, you can take rations, set up a feed budget, use that as a driver, and it's going to project when those animals are going to go to market, how much of each ingredient ration, and then back calculate the ingredients, and you can purchase them at a different time. So let's see, that's global sales projection. I say what my expected market price is at various increments. It can be months or weeks, and then I use a feeding projection that says I'm going to take what's in inventory. I'm going to calculate the feed requirements, the sales going to occur, and in this case, we typically do the projections by week and showing when their sales, and you can split if you can do 6 cuts out of a group and saying what days they're going to from on feed and what weight they're going to be sold, and then we do the build function. And so you can you can work off of actual numbers. You can project, and you can see what's going on inventory wise. You can see the rations being used down here, the yellow, that they're switching rations and coming up with the dollars and costs. And then there's a recap function that breaks down by month, ties back, shows the number of purchases and sold and prices and feed quantity. And this is called smart feeder planning, which works. The LifeCycle budget uses this function, but it adds scenarios to it, which smart feeder planning doesn't have scenarios, but it shows the total of each ingredient that's going to be used, because it knows what the rations are. It knows what the cost, what's in a ration, and then you can purchase the feed when it's required. So and that feeds back into the main cash flow. So here we're looking at the cash flow report, and it looks like a spreadsheet, but it's actually a live database. So we can touch right click on a line. This one here, right clicking on a feed line, and it takes stack to every purchase that occurs in that time window. So it's showing that this is on June. It's showing the total dollars. It shows ingredients that constitute that, and I can go actually and change the prices. I can adjust it, just drill down and adjust those prices. And here's more examples of feed being bucketed. And these are the different screens you can look at to go down. Here is a example of contract finishing, repetitive entry, and I can actually put in, it shows the quantity, unit price. This is could be built from actual. Then I go in and start tweaking with things. I got a new finisher, say here's the center, quantity, unit price, and I can I can adjust either the quantity or the unit price percentage it up and down, and push the save, and it refreshes the main report. The comparison that you have a budget to actual, and a budget should be monitored. I'm going to look at this, and I'll change it to 2017, which is
Norm, I don't think they see the balance. All they can see is what.
yeah, it will. I think it'll come through a choice of monthly, what scenario, and I can do divisions and centers. You'll see the screen right here. Okay, so what we're looking at is let's look at soybean sales up here in the screen right here, and 66,000, and let's see what the details are. So here's the budget, and so it was 6,000 at 12. Let's say it was 5,000 at 14. And look, it's right now 66,000, and now 70,000. So that's the, some of the budgeting functions. Labor, I can look at the labor for a month. I can look at it for the entire year. I slide over here, 360,000, and let's say I can change either the quantity, unit price. So let's make the unit price go up 15%. So you get a sense of what this is, and of course this is the database. I can paste it into Excel. I can do all kinds of other things with it. But it also, anything that's inventory related, I can go drill right into the detail. Now I want to show you a companion report. So I'm going to do a account summary report, and let's do it through the end of August in 2017. And then we use a choice, period, year to date, life cycle budget. And I'm going to use the life cycle budget variance. And then I pick my scenario. Let's use this one right here. And my budgets can be cash or management or market value. Use cash. And here's we call this a living budget because, and I will make sure you can see this screen. I think I need to do a new share. All right. So now you should be able to see this screen. And now we got some meaningful numbers comparison. Here's corn sales his budget was 350, the actual is 338. Budget on soybeans was 969. The actual was 969. The budget was 1150. So I can certainly drill in my actual information. I can also drill in my budget information and be able to change that. So what I'm seeing is here's the dollars variance, but I can also see what those are, and was it based on a quantity? Budget was 179,000 bushels, actually sold 171,000. Maybe there's more bushels to sell. That's isn't necessarily a bad thing. And so I can see what the comparison now is on a per unit basis. And anything that's unit based, fuel, fertilizer, anything like that would show up here in the on this comparison report. So a lot of meaty information, and it's all live. I go back in and edit the data from here. This is looking at fuel. That's a good example of something that you can tweak with the units and the unit price. That's feed budget. Okay. So here's room for improvement, and we're saying this got converted by Fetcher, and it's embedded in the code with accounting and everything else. Room for improvement, user interface. There needs to be things that are a little easier to find. It's a lot of menus. More real-time inventories on the balance sheet, and I can run a crop history, a crop inventory report for budget versus actual. I can do that. I can do all my ground truthing and proofing on a plan to make sure I'm not going to oversell my crop. That's all on the reports, the inputs and others. It's moving back and forth. It's just a little extra step, but and this is not really designed as an ad hoc tool. If you want your own customized report, your own customized budget, it's pretty structured, but it addresses 90% of what people want in budgets. Now, this is something we put together probably before even as we were developing it and where we wanted to go. And it's basically running backwards, activity-based costing running backwards. So you do your planning using your support centers, and you've got a historical mix between fuel and labor and other things that go into those supporting centers, and then they drive the ledger detail. And of course, the report itself is all ledger based. It says these are the counts there, but this does a decent job of budgeting inputs, but it doesn't drive any activity based costs. Doesn't create that. So that's would be our dream, to be able to do the kind of budgeting you're doing right now and have it create realizing there's a lot of moving pieces. What's the fuel price going to be? What's my operating costs on my equipment? What's the repairs, and be able to match that up. And still you get back to the update the database, but be able to drill things back. But we think it's got a good foundation. It just needs more interfaces and answering questions. How do you handle prepaids and other things that this handles? You can buy inputs in a prior year and have them roll into the balance, just like FBS does. The other thing it doesn't do, it'll do a balance sheet, but balance sheet, there's a lot of things that we, as you know, contributing to the balance sheet. This will track cash changes on the balance sheet. It's just how you get you show up a value of work in process, and it's a market value balance sheet. So it's whatever you say you at harvest price, that's what uses on the balance sheet. but it uses all the reports that are in FBS and crop audit and smart feeder. You can primarily crop audit, but you can select budget and scenarios and what you want to look at. So I'm laying this out as a work in process. Even, it does what it does a lot better than the standalone spreadsheet. And I think we need to get our heads together and come up with suggestions on how to build on this database engine and give it more logic.